Okay,
You do not listen to me. You deny the Christian God, but in order to do that, okay, see, you're not neutral. You're not unpersuaded. Your position entails the denial of the Christian God, or God for that matter, as the necessary prerequisite. So any words that come out of your mouth that you portend that they are intelligible is going to come from another system. If you have no system, if you have no identifiable and accountable system, your words are gibberish and gobbledygook.
Darth, my system and your system do not work together, right?
No, listen to me. You are ignoring what I am saying to you because you are still running away from God, because you do not want to give up your sovereignty. Now, you know what a sovereign citizen is?
I know, yes.
Okay, they claim they're sovereign citizens. That's why they do not have to comply with the police officer's request, or so they think. Now, here's the problem. The moment you say anything that by implication is a denial of God, you have then plunged yourself into a realm of absurdity, even though you are unwilling to acknowledge or admit that. But I can clearly show to you that anything you say is absurd. And you know why? It's because you cannot have a contextless fact. The only way that I can say the sky is blue is because of a worldview. There's God and his creation. There's God is omnipotent, omniscient, always truth revealing, and he has a plan by which he has instituted the world, and the world operates according to his irregularities, and so that I can know certain things. When you do not accept that, then what is your model of reality and its outermost context that's going to provide for the intelligibility of any putative facts therein? What is it? Because if you don't have one, listen to me, if you don't have an outermost context or framework, then you have no intelligibility for putative facts.
I do, and we've spoken about this before.
What is the outermost context that is the irreducible primary then?
I presuppose the uniformity of nature.
No, I didn't. No. I didn't ask you what you think.
Okay, right. What
you don't have to say, what is it ontologically that constitutes not God and is the necessary precondition and prerequisite for all temporal states?
I was getting to that. I felt.
What is it?
That the natural laws govern the world and there are no violations.
Okay, okay, are these laws that you are invoking,
that I presuppose, yes.
Do they sustain themselves?
Yes.
How do you know that?
To the best of my knowledge and to the best of my
hold on a second. Don't bullshit me. Okay?
I'm not bullshitting you.
Yeah, you are. You are doing that. That's why I said it. Now, okay. Is the causal principle and laws of nature, matter, energy, laws of nature, are they eternal?
I don't know the answer to that.
If you don't know the answer to that, then when you appeal to the outermost context of matter, energy, causality, and laws of nature, you are now just saying, well, it just is that way. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
Good. Now, when you say that the outermost framework for everything contained therein, that's just the way it is. And I say, okay, are these laws, right? When I ask you if they're eternal, the reason I ask you that is because if something is eternal, it will be unconditionally non-dependent. Okay?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Well, then the laws of nature, the putative laws of nature,
yes,
have no explanation for their existence.
Oh yeah, I don't know why they exist. Yes.
Okay, good. Now we're getting somewhere. We're making progress. Those are called brute facts. Now,
Okay.
all right. Now, did you want to say something, NRG? Okay.
Yeah. If the laws of nature are uncreated or a psi, that would necessitate that they're applicable to something. So that's something being the material order, right? And if matter is a psi, that implies that time
Now
is
the word
a
is
psi.
he doesn't understand that it's aseity. Okay. Say.
I butchered.
So what? That's okay. When you say the laws of nature are just there, but you're just saying they just are. Okay, they just are. They just happen to be that way. You're not positing that the laws of nature are ultimate and eternal and unconditionally non-dependent. Do you understand? That would be different if you said the laws of nature are eternal, ultimate, and unconditionally non-dependent. But you're not saying that. You're just saying, well, they just are without any explanation. Well, your model of reality now is a chance world. And in a chance world, listen carefully, in a chance world, you cannot delineate what is possible or impossible. Okay? In a chance world, where the outermost framework, the outermost contextual layer to explain putative facts are chance entities themselves, right? Then you cannot invoke anything, you cannot say what is possible or what is impossible. And if you don't have a framework to delineate or to determine what is possible and impossible, you have no intelligibility for any facts whatsoever. Now, the only reason why you will continue to believe that you do have intelligibility is because you're refusing to look at your own worldview. Okay? Your outermost contextual layer that is required for intelligibility of temporal facts or putative facts are brute facts. They're just chance occurrences. They just are. They're not ultimate. I don't know either. They're just there. And if you have a chance system, right? If everything is ultimately chance, then you cannot have intelligibility for particulars. Do you understand the consequences? Yanis?
Oh yeah, sorry, it wasn't me. You were talking to somebody else.
No, I'm talking to you. When you appeal to laws of nature as brute facts, first of all...
Oh yes, I do. Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Right, yeah, well, then that's catastrophic. It renders your worldview as absurd.
Okay. Explain me how.
I just did. Weren't you listening?
Well, I thought you were talking to somebody else, but anyway.
I'll explain it to you again really briefly. If you have nothing that is identifiably ultimate and its attributes and property set, then you cannot identify what is possible and impossible, because a possibility resides in the attributes and properties of what is ultimate. On the other hand, if you say, well, I don't know what's ultimate, but then your system is just an appeal to possibility, then anything goes. Then you can't. Okay. Then you cannot say. Then you cannot say what is or is what is not.
Okay, so am I wrong in your view when I presuppose the uniformity of nature?
Your worldview is that the so-called uniformity of nature is simply chance.
Well, you say it.
Listen to me carefully.
I'm listening.
In a chance world, continuity is simply an illusion.
Okay.
In a chance world, continuity, things that stay the same while other things change, is an illusion.
Okay, but I'm not saying it's chance totally.
No, you're not understanding. Then you're going to have to tell me, are the laws of nature, are they eternal, ultimate, without beginning, and unconditionally non-dependent?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. I'm saying that they appear.
No. Listen carefully. You're being evasive. Don't you understand how I'm smoking out your dishonesty as a sinner before God? Don't you understand that? Don't you understand your core motivation is rebellion against God, and you're trying to justify your rebellion by hiding behind, well, I don't have a reason to believe. I'm just unconvinced. But I've already showed you that that's gibberish. Now, your worldview is a world of chance.
Darth, do you hold to any science work?
Do you understand that your worldview is chance?
I'm asking you a question now.
Do you understand your worldview is chance?
I'm not looking for you to mute me, but I was...
Do you understand that your model of reality is that the outermost framework that provides for temporal occurrences is chance?
No.
Okay, now, what is it then that is ultimate in your worldview, which is the indispensable primary of existence for all temporal facts? What is it?
Oh, nature appears to be uniform.
Okay. See, now you're persisting in being dishonest. I didn't ask you how things appear. I asked you, what is it that is ultimate and that is the primary origin point for all possibility and impossibility? What is it?
Okay, look, it's getting late here. I do apologize if I can't...
Now, I want the other people in the room to know this is a classic example of the sinful human heart, who they have one priority, okay? And I'll quote Jesus from the parables. We will not have this man rule over us, because there's only two positions that you can take. Either the mind of God and his person is ultimate and the ultimate authority, wherein your mind would be in submission and subjugation to God's mind, okay? Or your mind is sovereign. You do not need to subject your thoughts and your reasonings to the mind of God. In other words, that your mind has to be in alignment with the mind of God and how he's revealed it. So your mind is which determines what the nature of reality is. So that, listen, rather than God communicating to you what the nature of reality is so that you can understand facts and so that you can cross-check and cross-reference your thinking with God's, okay? Your position is called autonomous reasoning. So you cannot deny this. You are operating under autonomous reasoning. Do you understand that?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to...
Okay, now, here's the problem. Autonomous reasoning always leads to contradiction and absurdity. How are you going to be able to unify all the array of particulars out there? What unifies everything? Where do you get universals? Where do you get classes? Now, if you tell me, oh, well, I can see them. Well, all you're simply telling me is there's an appearance of these things. I want to know what actually provides for actual unity as opposed to the appearance of unity. Do you know what a doppelganger is?
I do.
Okay, do you remember the picture I showed the other night of the female doppelgangers? If I show them to anyone on the street, people say, oh, yeah, well, they're sisters. No, they're not. They have an appearance of unity. But it's only coincidental. There's no, other than setting aside that their DNA happened to produce their same face, we can say analogously that the reason why they look this way is not by law, because they're sisters or near relatives, right? Like, I look like my brothers. I sound like my brothers. Is that purely coincidental? Or is there some law behind it? Well, the answer is there is a law behind it. It's called my mother and my father's biological blueprint.
Oh,
That's why I look like my mother. I look like my mother and my father and my brother we all sound the same.
Yes,
okay?
This is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
genetics would
right, right. So the unity that is there is not illusory.
Oh no, of course not.
Good. Now, in order for you to make sense of your world, you've got to show that unity is not illusory.
Well,
so what secures, where do you get the unity amongst the array of particulars? Because you want to claim that there are laws of nature. Laws of nature are types of universals.
Yes.
Good. What is it? What is it? I'm going to ask you a very simple question. What is it that provides for the actuality of unity among diversity? What secures that?
Well, are you talking about our genetics still, or what?
No, I'm talking about any universals that are actual as opposed to...
Oh, yeah, we seem to... I told you before, I think we have universal laws of nature that...
No. Hold on a second. These laws of nature, do they secure themselves? Are they ultimate and absolute?
They secure themselves, yes.
Okay, and how did you determine that?
We reproduce the same results over and over when we...
No, you're okay. No. Every day the farmer comes out and he feeds the chicken, and the chicken says, listen, there's the law of the farmer. And the other chicken says, what are you talking about? He says, every day the farmer comes out and he feeds us at 9 o'clock in the morning. Look, I'm going to predict tomorrow the farmer's going to come out and feed us because that's the way it's always happened in the past. The farmer comes out the next day. He said, you see? And he says, I'm going to predict every day for the next 10 years, that farmer's going to come out without fail, same time every day. It's called the law of the farmer. But on the first day of the 16th year, the farmer comes out and he cuts the chicken's head off.
Possibly.
So you see, what you have to show is that any appearance of consistency is the product of something that is law-like. Okay. So the fact that there have been a consistency and that you even may have predictive capability without fail does not logically necessitate that these universals actually exist, that they are law-like.
So when you talk about this, right?
Hold on a second. If I were to take the picture of those young women who are doppelgangers and I were to show them to young children, because young children don't understand doppelgangers and even genetics, they're going to be bamboozled. They're going to be totally bewildered that they're not. How can they not be sisters? They look just like each other. Because even little children understand familial resemblance. Even little children understand that there are people who are identical twins because they're of a common biological source. Okay? Now, am I going to blow the minds, blow away the children when I say, listen, they don't have the same parents. They're not even blood related. And little kids are going to go, how is that possible? Okay? Now, that doesn't prove what I'm saying. It's analogous. When you appeal to unity that is out there or consistency, is the consistency real as opposed to illusory? And is the consistency that is not illusory secured by something either itself or something extraneous to itself. Now, you said the laws of nature are ultimate in and of themselves, but you contradicted yourself because a few minutes ago you said you don't know what it is that secures the laws of nature, but now you tell me that the laws of nature are absolute themselves. So you have absolutely contradicted yourself. So are the laws of nature secured by something further out contextually, or are the laws of nature ultimate themselves? Because if they're not ultimate, they don't secure themselves.
Okay, relax.
Which is it?
So I'm saying that nature is uniform, right?
No. What is the uniformity of nature secured by what is ultimate? Or is the appearance of these consistencies simply illusory and chance?
Well, hold on. You make two different things there, right? You say, is it secured by something, or...
Dude, my patience is really running out from you because you're simply being a rebellious sinner. Now, one more time.
Darth.
Which is it? Are the laws of nature, are they absolute and ultimate in themselves? Or is there something else contextually that is absolute and ultimate that secures laws of the continuity that we call laws of nature? Which is it?
If you're trying to point to God, I don't think...
Which is it?
Okay. Can I say something once before you...
Okay, if you don't answer the question, we're going to be done with you. You want to say the laws of nature exist without God. I want to know, are the laws of nature godlike? Are they ultimate and absolute in and of themselves, in that they secure themselves from eternity? Or is there something that is ultimate that provides for the actual continuity? Which is it?
Darth, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, you see, you can't answer the question.
It's about time.
Okay? So what we've seen on full display here, I am confronting him with the absolute, complete absurdity of his position. There's nowhere for him to turn now. Okay? He's tried, mumbo jumbo and Bolshevicking. But because he does not want to give up his own autonomous reasoning, he does not want to surrender and say, yes, God is the sovereign one. God himself is only that which is autonomous, and that my reason, in order for it to exist, in order for my reason to be intelligible, must be in subjugation to the autonomous mind of God. He doesn't want to do that. So what he wants to do is he wants to try to make a case that his reason can actually exist and it can be intelligible without reference to God. Well, your reason is either going to itself have to be ultimate and absolute and eternal, not requiring any further contextual frame of reference, or you're going to have to tell me what is the outermost contextual layer that provides for this possibility or putative fact. Well, the answer is he has none. Well, 1 minute he says, 1 minute. Yeah. Well, we're done with him because this is the same old dishonesty and deceit that we get from Yanis every single time.
Yeah, he literally wasted almost an hour of everyone's.
It's like clockwork.
The only honest answer you could give would just to say, I don't know.
What I've done is I've reduced his position to absurdity. He rejects and denies the self-disclosure of God, who is the irreducible primary. That God is that which is indispensable, the ground of all being, ultimate, from which all possibilities derive. I like what Van Til said. He said, the only things that are possible are the only things that God make are possible are possible. You got that? The only things that God determines are possible are possible.
Okay, well, how do you know it's the Christian God specifically?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that is consistent with my worldview, and any other answer would actually be a contradiction of my worldview. Is because he has revealed it. Otherwise, I couldn't know it. And the denial that God is the necessary prerequisite of all facts and the intelligibility of facts, and I know that because he has revealed himself in both natural revelation, meaning all facts indicate the eternal, and that God has given additional progressive revelation, right? The denial thereof will result in catastrophic absurdity. In other words, whatever putative facts or predications come out of your mouth, there will be no model of reality or contextual framework to provide for the intelligibility of those facts or particulars. See, this is nuclear strength. And you cannot sit there and play the game of, well, I'm unpersuaded. Because neutrality toward God as ultimate is the denial of God as ultimate. If God is simply an unimaginably powerful, unimaginably knowledgeable, unembodied cosmic hall monitor, well, then you could be neutral toward that thing. But that thing would be subject to reality. But you see, God himself is se. He is not derived or dependent upon anything external to himself. And therefore, everything else derives from God as the irreducible, indispensable primary. And not only does it derive from God, it derives its intelligibility, and without which, acknowledging God, referencing God, there cannot be any intelligibility for facts or particulars. Now, if somebody wants to say, oh no, I can't have intelligibility, then I'm going to say, good. Step up to the plate, take a couple of practice swings, and go for it.
I'm kind of confused. What do you mean by he revealed it?
The only way for us to know that God is, being that God is ultimate and eternal, is he would have to construct a world in such a way according to certain parameters that we are instantiated in. So God has created a world where there's matter, energy, causality, laws of nature. He has created man who is made in his image, where our cognitive apparatus at a foundational level thinks like him. And in the creation itself, God has designed it in such a way that all facts, not just some, all facts equally and collectively are indicative of the eternal.
So are you saying that God revealed himself by creating the universe?
When you look upon any temporal fact, that is a revelation of the eternal. Because the temporal fact couldn't exist without the eternal. Unless, of course, you want to believe that something pops into existence out of nothing.
Okay, but how does that connect to like the Bible and specifically the Christian God? Couldn't
Well,
Allah
the
have
God,
created the universe?
No, because the Allah is incoherent. Allah is the figment of Allah's illiterate imagination. Allah claims to be omniscient. Did you know that?
Muhammad's
Now,
imagination.
excuse me, Muhammad. Yeah, Muhammad spoke that Allah condemned the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, and they specify the Christian doctrine of the Trinity as Allah, Jesus, and Mary. But nobody ever worshipped the Trinity in that form. Oops. Allah doesn't solve the one and the many problem. In order to have intelligibility, okay, what is the ultimate nature of reality? Is it in its oneness or its manyness? Well, that problem is solved in the triune nature of the Christian God. His oneness, his unity, and his diversity have equal ultimacy. That in turn is reflected in his creation. Okay. Whenever somebody makes something, it reflects something of what they are. God in turn creates or instantiates creation that has both unity and diversity. He secures the universals or unity among the array of particulars, because without establishing the equal ultimacy of unity and diversity, you could not have intelligibility for particulars or facts. But you see, the God of Islam is a monad. He is not multi-personal, right? He does not have diversity. He's simply a unit. Okay?
I don't really know that much about Islam.
Okay, well, when you appeal to other God concepts, and by the way, I'm not criticizing.
Hi, hey guys, what's up?
Spencer,
Spencer
one moment,
Katois
guys.
here.
One moment. Shut up, everybody.
Spencer
shut up.
Katois here, back with another video. Can you guys add my
Get this
Snapchat?
troll out. Get this troll out.
Please add Spencer.Katois134.
No one cares. No one.
Please add the Snapchat.
Nobody cares.
What's up, Spencer?
One of
Oh.
You guys like to join us?
I just came in at the right time.
What is this nonsense?
What the devil?
What I'd like to know is how did he get so many accounts?
He was botting in.
Well, how do you do that? How do you do that?
Don't worry about it.
Please do not mute me.
You've been using multiple windows and browsers.
One of them, I think, was misspelled.
Like 5 of them were misspelled. Spencer Katois.
Okay. So because of God's sovereignty and providence and his plan, facts are only facts, or particulars are only intelligible with respect to the ground of all being and his plan, without which no fact would be discernible or intelligible. Now, when I say that, people are going to say, well, that's ridiculous. I know plenty of atheists who can pinpoint facts and provide intelligibility. Well, no, you can't, because you just simply haven't pursued their epistemology to its ultimate starting point, which is nowhere. So you can know that the God of the Bible is true, not only or simply because of his sovereign revelation, that all of it, once you understand the basic property and attribute set of the God of the Bible, then you know that intelligibility for particulars or facts is going to require that property set. And without that property set, there cannot be human intelligibility. Now, if somebody says, no, I don't buy that, that's a bunch of balderdash, I say, fine. Explain to me what model of reality that you are actually speaking from, and how does its properties and attributes on an ultimate or outer contextual level provide for the intelligibility of individual facts or particulars. You cannot have a contextless fact.
I still don't see how that relates to specifically the God of the Bible. Like, couldn't there be another God that has like the same properties that you're describing?
Well, that would be the Christian God then.
But does that mean like? But how does that
No,
connect to
no.
the
I'll
stories
tell
in
you.
the
No,
Bible?
I'll tell you why. Because the Christian God's property set also include his creation, his acting temporally throughout creation and acting providentially. So, for example, you couldn't possibly accuse me of simply fabricating the Christian God's property set when I wasn't around 2,000 years ago. I wasn't around 3,000 years ago. The Bible is a historical product. And so a part of God's property set of both his immutable characteristics and his accidental characteristics are his acts of creation and revelation. And so another thing is, you're going to have to also say, is the current state of affairs, the human condition, normal or abnormal? And if it's abnormal, is there a redemptive program that deals not only with the consequences after death, but the present consequences of the futility of man's thinking? Or do you think that man's thinking is normal? So you see, any other idolatrous God that is presented cannot have the property set of the Christian God. It's impossible.
Because you're saying because.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. You have been presented that the God of the Bible's property set are the necessary and sufficient conditions for the actuality of temporal facts, but for the intelligibility of those facts. Now, if you don't have a defeater for that, right? But what you want to do in order to defeat the Christian God is not to deny him, but to say, well, there's an alternative. Well, you're only going to be able to do that, excuse me, is if you tell me what your model of reality is. Telling me that there is some potential actual other model of reality out there that is not your own is a logical contradiction. If you don't accept the self-disclosure of the Christian God and his property set as the basis of the actuality of all facts and the intelligibility of facts, then you're going to have to tell me how your world and its ultimacy provides for actuality and intelligibility. And everything that I've just said to you is entirely consistent with and actually drawn from what the Bible teaches.
Well, how do we know the Bible is correct?
Because without it, you couldn't know anything was correct.
Do we know for sure that anything is correct?
Listen carefully. The Bible is not just simply a book about some facts. The Bible is a complete model of reality. From Genesis to Revelation, it's a complete model of reality. Now, the reason why you can know that the Bible as a complete package, as a model of reality is true, is because it's indispensable. Without it, you wouldn't be able to know anything is true. You wouldn't even be able to count rocks. You wouldn't even be able to identify that anything is a rock. Now, if you don't accept what I'm saying, then you can tell me that without the God of the Bible being indispensable and the Christian worldview, his self-disclosure being an indispensable frame of reference by which we can have intelligibility for facts, then you can tell me what is the indispensable model of reality or frame of reference that provides you with the ability to have intelligibility for dogs, cats, trees, rocks, or for that matter, the ability to count pebbles.
Can you explain what you mean by intelligibility?
That a particular means something in terms of the nature of reality that it exists in.
Well, I mean, I kind of think.
Can you have a contextless fact?
What do you mean by that?
Can you have a fact that has no context?
I don't know. Probably not.
Okay, well, I'm telling you that the God of the Bible has revealed himself in natural revelation and in special revelation. You and I both know, and all human beings do, insofar as you have a normal brain, that all facts individually and collectively, being that they're temporal facts, are indicative of the eternal. Okay? Temporal facts indicate the eternal. Right? Now you say, oh,
an example about context.
Sure, anyone can jump in.
So let's say one of your really good friends gave you some really bad news, and then they told you your mother was murdered on the porch. You'd want to find out who was responsible, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what if it turns out they dropped the bomb on you, and then they say, well, except you guys were playing Uno, and then you find out, well, he just got murdered in a car game. Now, the fact that you thought was the case, it turns out it actually was not, because now you have a broader scope of what was actually being said. So this idea that your mother was like killed and murdered does not exist because there's no context for it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when you have a broader scope, you can understand that the context that your mother was killed by somebody on the porch doesn't exist because there's no context for it. He was actually talking about a game. So if you don't have a context for something, you can't have an effect. That's what Darth is talking about.
Yeah, you cannot have actuality or intelligibility for any fact unless there's a context. Now, when we speak, the context for facts are not always explicitly presented. They're more often implicit, but it is nonetheless there. And so the God of the Bible is the indispensable, irreducible, ultimate, that is the context for everything. In other words, everything is God's creation. It derives its existence, its meaning, and intelligibility because of God's existence. And we know this because of his revelation. Now, when somebody says, well, I don't accept it is revelation, then what they're saying is, they're not saying that the Bible doesn't exist. They're just saying that the entities in question themselves not only are not revelatory, that they don't have authority. Then the person themselves is going to be there by implication claiming, hold on a second. The person is claiming self-autonomy to adjudicate particulars and facts. The person himself will have autonomous reasoning. The mind of man, without any reference to any higher mental authority, is going to make a determination as to what the nature of existence is, whereupon to place facts and interpret those facts. So, for example, as a Christian, if I give an interpretation of facts that is inconsistent with what the Bible says, Tonlock, being a Bible-believing Christian, saying, well, your interpretation is incorrect because you see it doesn't conform to the mind of God, who is the autonomous one. But when you reject, when you do not accept that all facts around you indicate the eternal one, and that his special revelation is not self-disclosure, then by default, you are claiming to be in possession of autonomous reasoning, that your mind, or in conjunction with other human minds, is basically able to make a determination as to what the nature of reality is in order to make individual particulars meaningful and intelligible.
I kind of disagree because I don't think that we can know for certain whether things are true or for certain what the nature of reality is.
Is that a true statement?
Well, I don't know, but what I'm saying is like,
okay, if you don't know it's a true statement, why should I pay attention to what you just said?
I don't think we know that anything is true. 100%.
No, you're not. You see, you're not understanding. Every time you speak, by implication, you're making a truth statement. If you don't know it's true, then why are you predicating?
Because I don't think it's possible to have complete certainty.
Well, how do you know what's possible?
I don't.
Well, then if you don't know what's possible, then you can't know what it is possible or impossible. So you have to keep your mouth. Then you have to keep that. No, you just said, I don't think it's possible to do X. Well, you're telling me what's not possible. Where'd you get that from?
He's also
Yeah.
asserting his own mind state.
You see, if you don't know what the ultimate nature of reality is, what the irreducible, indispensable primary is from which all temporal facts come from, then you have no grounds upon which to assert what is possible or impossible, do you?
No, I'm not trying to.
No, you just did. You just said X is not possible. You just said truth, apprehending truth is not possible. So you're telling me something that's not possible. So it's possible for you to know that something is impossible.
I mean, the same could be said for your argument.
You didn't understand what I just said. You are making statements of possibility and impossibility. Can you make statements of possibility or impossibility without a foundation from which they derive?
It's going to take a minute to think about that.
Arbitrarily, you could.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the way that you can know that Jesus Christ was who he said he was, and the Christian scriptures are in fact God's word, is because without them, you are doomed to incoherence and intelligibility. And the only reason why you will not accept that is because you're not willing to examine your world to see if the facts that you think are meaningful actually have meaning. What is the context that provides for it? Imagine I went to my local police precinct and I said, I just saw a murder. And they go, okay, what happened? So the guy came into the room, he pulled out a gun, he shot the other guy in the head, right? And he ran out. So what did he look like? Well, he had red hair, he's about 6 foot tall, and he was kind of hefty, and he walked with a limp, right? And I keep on giving more details. And then the last detail I give him is that it was an episode of Hawaii Five-0. Now, does that outermost context change the viability and intelligibility of the putative facts that I'm presenting to the police? The outermost context changes everything. It can mean the difference between something being actual or not actual. It makes the difference between something being human comprehensible or not comprehensible or intelligible.
Why do you think you have the authority to determine which outer context is true?
Oh, I don't have the authority. What I'm saying to you is that the God of the Bible, his property set, and his self-disclosure are indispensable. That's how you can know they're true. If you say, I don't accept that, then what you're claiming is the God of the Bible, his revelation, is not indispensable for the establishment of the actuality of facts and the intelligibility of facts. Then I will say to you, good. Then explain to me, what is your model of reality? What is the most indispensable thing of existence that provides for everything existing and its intelligibility? What is your ultimate commitment?
In other words, what's the outermost contextual layer?
Yeah. What's your ultimate commitment that provides for all sub-beliefs? Because if you don't have an ultimate commitment, then anything goes. You have no grounding. So to show you, I'm not presenting to you that Christianity, the Christian worldview, is a better worldview. I'm not saying that Christianity is more coherent. My position is, and I'm repeating what other theological giants have said, Christianity is the only intelligible and coherent worldview, and the denial of it results in complete and catastrophic unintelligibility. That's how you can know it's true. Because if I just start saying to you, well, you know what? Christianity is true. You know, Jesus rose again from the dead. You could sit there and go, well, I don't believe those witnesses. They could have been hallucinating. Or you could sit there and go, well, you know, in a really big universe, sometimes really weird things happen in isolation. But on average, things happen on a regular basis. But sometimes there are anomalies that are just unknown. So it doesn't matter what lines of reasoning I give to you. You can just simply reinterpret it away. Do you know why? It's because you are already operating from a position of no God. It's not that you're unpersuaded. You have already decided that you can reason about the apple on the counter and about the dog running in the backyard, excuse me, or the sky is blue without necessitating the reference of God as the indispensable, irreducible primary. So there is no neutrality toward God, in spite of the fact that people will profess their neutrality. You know, one of my brothers said years ago, and I'll never forget it, and he was studying some theological works at the time, and he said to me, talk is cheap. Okay? People will Bolshevik. Oh, I'm not saying God doesn't exist. Oh, yes, you are. Because all I have to say is, do you assert that God is the indispensable, necessary prerequisite for everything? And if the person says no, then they have denied God. Because in a world where God is the irreducible, indispensable primary. So the point is this: it's either the God of the Bible and his loving and gracious self-disclosure of himself, whereupon he commands you and I to repent. So not only that we can be redeemed in terms of we will not be eternally separated from him in the lake of fire, but so that in every area of life we can be redeemed and we can be saved from the incoherence and unintelligibility. The smartest scientists in the world, if they're not Christian, their scientific theorizing is gobbledygook because it comes from a chance world. Now, I am not saying that an atheist or an unbeliever cannot come to know things and discover things about the world. But the only reason why I believe that an unbeliever God denier can is because he actually lives in God's world, and God has constructed a world that even unbelievers, through mental effort and acuity, can discover some things about God's creation in spite of the fact that they deny that God is the necessary prerequisite and they're inconsistent with their reasoning. But when somebody says, I don't need your God, I don't need the God of the Bible, you haven't proven it, and the very statement, you haven't proven it, is the denial of it. At least if you're acquainted with the basic concepts and storyline or plot of the Christian scriptures, if somebody says, well, you haven't proven it, then that is the denial of what the Bible claims for itself, and it is the denial of the Christian worldview. And what it does is, it therefore renders any predication or assertion that anyone makes as being baseless, and it has no foundation or grounding. We had an atheist in here earlier who wanted to say, well, you haven't persuaded me about your God. And I said, good. Then what is your outermost context that's going to provide for the actuality and intelligibility facts? And he goes, the laws of nature. And then I said, are the laws of nature, do they secure themselves? Are they ultimate and eternal and unconditionally non-dependent? Or is there something that is an outer layer of context that is ultimate, that secures seemingly the laws of nature? Or otherwise, what you think are the laws of nature is simply the appearance of continuity. Okay? You know, that happens in movies all the time. They film scenes out of order, right? And they even have specialists in movies that are called, you can see it in the credits, that they're in charge of continuity, that certain parameters say the same. So if we have certain things that are continuous or regular, we call that continuity. But the continuity could be actual or it could be illusory. So when an unbeliever says, well, I don't need your God, I have the laws of nature, I say, good. In my world, the laws of nature are real only because they're instituted by God and they're secured by God. When you refer to the laws of nature, are they actual? Is this continuity of existence? Is it illusory or is it actual? And if it's actual, what secures it? Is it itself or is it something else?
I don't think we know.
Well, then that's the problem. Then if in your denial that the Christian God and that the mind and plan of God in creation is the ground of all existence and temporal facts and wisdom and knowledge, then you cannot know anything, in spite of the fact that you think you do. And if you tell me that you know one thing, I have a few questions for you. If God isn't necessary, then how do you know anything? In the Christian worldview, I can know what my mother's middle name is because God's created a world where people can communicate certain facts that are objective.
All right. I still don't understand why it has to be the Christian God, but I have to go now anyway. So
well, if you have a God who's not omniscient, what if he constructs a world where you can't know things?
Well, what if there is a God that's omniscient that just didn't do all the things in the Bible?
But I'm not talking about that God.
Well, why?
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Well, here's the problem. Now what you're doing is you're talking about one or more gods as though they were possibilities. That's incoherent. God, by definition, is not a possibility. God, by definition, will be that which is ultimate, that prescribes what is possible and impossible. So if you do not accept the God of the Bible as the indispensable origin of what is possible and impossible, then you're going to have to tell me what foundation you're speaking from, because you cannot appeal to other worldviews other than your own. And if you do, that's logically incoherent.
All right, I think we're just kind of talking in circles. So thank you.
Well, no. Wait, hold on a second. I haven't spoken in circles. I have given you. You see that? Here's another example, folks. Do you see this, folks? Now you'll notice I went down straightforwardly, step by step, transcendental reasoning. That God is a transcendental necessity, right? And because he's confronted with his own sin and the futility of his own autonomous reasoning, rather than admit it, he wants to straw man my position as saying I'm talking in circles. You see how the sinful human heart operates?
Why are all of the atheists in here so stupid?
You know, honestly, I think the reason we see more and more conversations that go this direction is because people simply don't acknowledge that there's an other side to the argument. For example, I don't think any of these atheists ever expected to get an argument contrary to what they had proposed.
No, what the atheists expect is for you to like in a courtroom, say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have exhibit A. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have exhibit B and C and D and E. And collectively, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, A through E raises the probability that there's God. This is how Christians have been capitulating to the autonomous reason of unbelievers. This is not like a court case. Either everything stands in causal relations with God or nothing does. Okay? And the unbeliever has already decided that he can have the actuality and intelligibility of facts and particulars without the necessity of referencing God as the outermost context for those facts. Right? So they're not being neutral. And this is not an easy thing to communicate, and I'm still working on the presentation of this. But it's imperative as Christians that we explain to unbelievers that we're not neutral, we can't be neutral, and they're not neutral. Nobody is neutral. Neutrality is just simply a facade, a costume hiding the hostility toward God. Right?
Right.
So when the talk schmeathens and the atheist YouTubers say atheism is not the denial of God but the rejection of a God claim, yeah, you are rejecting the concept where God is ultimate, and consequently there is his derivational creation, and that all facts derive their existence and meaning and intelligibility because of God and his plan. The non-acceptance of that scenario is the denial of it, because God himself as the outermost context is not any other ordinary fact like Russell's teapot. Okay?
Okay.
So as brilliant as Bertrand Russell was, and the reason why I bring it up is because we were talking about it before, even he made a major faux pas because he's treating God as just any other fact. Once you understand that God is in the category of a transcendental necessity, if you lack belief in that, that void must be filled. Otherwise, you don't have an instantiation of facts or their intelligibility. Now, sometimes they're so stupid as they want to deny that there's a transcendental necessity, that there needs to be something that is the ground of all existence or ultimate. And Van Til talks about this in his book or in his writings. And I still have a long way to go in reading his material, but how they kind of, on the one hand, they want to say that something's ultimate, but it's not God. But on the other hand, they want to believe that nothing's ultimate and that we just have a variety of facts out there that they just are. Right?
Yeah.
And once you understand the biblical transcendental viewpoint, then it's like the light clicks on you. You realize how they profess to be wise and they become fools, because now whatever facts come out of their mouth, they say, okay, why is that a fact? If I say to Tonlock, pro-choice is up at the top. If I say, why is the sky blue a fact? What are you going to say, Tonlock?
Because excuse me, because God in his eternal essence grounds it, given his nature.
Yeah, God created it. It's a created fact. God instituted this world and he sustains this world. That's why it's a fact. But if somebody comes along and says, no, you haven't proven that. It's just a fact by itself. Oh, okay. So now what they're saying is a fact is in the same category as God. And if they say, well, you haven't proven you're God, good. Can you tell me how your fact is eternal and is ultimate and unconditionally non-dependent? You see, everybody, when either God is in their thoughts or there's not. And if God is not in their thoughts, then what they do is they just think, well, something static's out there. That's why my residence is still here today. That's why the world is still here. It may change tomorrow, but it'll still be here. It'll change form, but it's still here. So they believe that something is, irreducible. Because if they don't, then they're going to believe that something comes from nothing.
The real crazy part is when they actually go full blown into, something comes from nothing. There's no logic. Yeah. Everything's nonsense. Those are the real lunatics.
Right. And then they're showing full blown how craven they are to retain their own human autonomy. And you got to drive home to the unbeliever that they cannot deny that in their non-acceptance as God being the autonomous one, they are now autonomous. Their mind does not need to subject itself to the mind of God.
Greg Bonson, he said, I forget the exact quote, so I'm going to paraphrase. He said something like they're willing to set aside basic fundamental rules of thought in order to deny that God exists.
Yep.
Basically.
So the point is, we do not need a prolonged verbal campaign presenting the Christian worldview, because that's what they want us to do. They want us to get on a treadmill where you don't go anywhere, where all they want to say is, okay, give me some more evidence. Okay, then go A, B, and C. That raises the probability of God. Okay, D, E, F, G. No, that doesn't raise the probability. So this is a little game they want to play. Why would we say that certain facts raise the probability of God when God is... Let's think about it something else, okay?
Only transcendental categories that are of his very being can...
Yeah, God is transcendentally necessary for facts. So the issue of just trying to dump a selection of facts and saying these collectively or conjoined raise the probability of God is unbiblical. Okay, we're now treating God as though he were some other fact rather than God as a transcendental necessity. Okay, God is such a transcendental necessity. He's transcendentally necessary for all facts.
If you want to put it into like an interesting analogy, God has, and he's a fully built castle that cannot be broken down. And when you argue evidentially, what you try to do is build your own castle by arguing brick by brick instead of castle by castle. The idea is that the Christian castle or the Christian God is necessary to even utter a syllable. So why would you even grant the unbeliever one brick of their own castle?
So, for example, if you were not to talk about God, but they were to talk about some other belief that they had, and you were to say to them, do you believe it on the grounds of evidence, or do you believe it because it's transcendentally necessary? Otherwise, you can have no intelligibility, right? So, for example, do you say to an unbeliever, do you believe that all entities equal themselves and cannot equal their negation at all times and all places? Is it because that you've observed all entities at all times? Or is it a transcendental necessity in order for you to have intelligibility about talking about things. Well, of course they're going to accept it as a transcendental necessity. But you see, when they accept the transcendental necessity of the laws of logic, it's not going to, they do not reason that they're going to have to relinquish the supremacy or sovereignty of their reason to another. But when we start talking about God as the transcendental necessity, they want nothing to do with it, because even the dumbest of these atheists know that if we can show that God is a transcendental necessity, which cannot be denied, then it will be incumbent upon them to relinquish the sovereignty of their reasoning and to abandon their autonomy of reason.
That's why a lot of atheists have no problem if you say the ultimacy of reality is non-personal. They'll say, "Oh yeah, no problem with that."
Yeah, as long as it's impersonal.
Isn't the dilemma that they are using their worldview to understand your logic? So it'll still be absurd intellect to them, right?
Well, we don't have neutral ground, but we have common ground because we're both made in the image of God. Okay? And because they're made in the image of God, we do have common ground by which we can reason with them, but we do not have neutral ground. And so we have to point out to them, if they want to have questions about the Bible, well, why is the Bible the Word of God? We can explain, the history of the Bible. But that's not the issue, okay? Look, I was watching Doug from Pine Creek, and he's one of the slipperiest, devious of the atheists out there. And I've debated him 2 or 3 times. And I put him into a transcendental corner. He knew he couldn't get out of it. So you know what he did? You know what this sleazebag did? He goes, "Tell me about Jesus." Now, was he being sincere?
Starting to feel like, possibly like a real debacle.
Or was this a faux or fake interest in the person of Jesus?
I mean,
if you watch his show, he's constantly talking about his background as being a Christian in various denominations and studying theology. He knows all about the gospel. He's very acquainted with biblical themes, and he's categorically rejected all of it. But when I confronted him with the biblical presuppositional transcendental line of reasoning, for which there is no weapon that can be used against it, he tries to change the subject. Tell me about Jesus. Don't you want to tell me about your Lord and Savior? And on a subsequent video, and you can go on to his YouTube site, this is what he says to do. He goes, when you encounter presuppositionalists, he goes, don't engage them on the issue of biblical presuppositionalism. Just start asking them about Jesus. What he's trying to do is he's trying to bait you to walk down the path of evidentialism. Give me some more facts that raise the probability of God, and then maybe I'll if I consider that God is probable, then I'll accept it. But what he doesn't understand is any God that you say is more probable is no God at all, and wouldn't be the God of the Bible.
Eric Permboy Murphy is debating Tyler Vela.
I have that. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. He's a nauseating person.
Yeah, I didn't start watching it, so I don't really know.
Well, I'm hoping that Tyler points out to him that a lack of belief constitutes the denial of God. Because if he doesn't do that, then he's playing their game.
Well, Tyler uses the presuppositionalist method.
Oh, does he? Good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Tyler Vela?
Yeah, he's probably one of the most knowledgeable presuppositionalists on.
I did not know that. I've heard his name, but I'm looking forward to that now.
Can you link the debate in?
Yeah, in the Atheist Helpline.
Yeah, he recently destroyed Tom Jones.
Well, yeah, anyone could do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know much about it.
I just posted it in general chat.
Including Tom Jump. Even Tom Jump destroys Tom Jump. He's like, wrecked Tom once again.
I posted it in Atheist Helpline as well.
Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that he reasons transcendentally.
I don't know what you're talking about, dude. NRG or DL. I think Parakeet is the best presuppositionalist online.
No, he's not, because he doesn't use AirPods.
That automatically demotes him to number 15 on the list.
Yeah, if I got the AirPods, my power level would be over 9,000.
And just a little dirty secret, he pulled me aside the other day and he just gave me a tongue lashing. Really lowered my self-esteem. No, he didn't. That's just a joke, an inside joke.
Hey, Darth. Do you think
what?
I understand? So I understand your position, and I would probably agree, is that the evidential arguments need to be formed within a transcendental framework. I wonder how exactly would.
All right. Let me look up the Van Til quote while you're talking.
That's good. Yeah. So the idea is that, like, I've really grown an interest in, like, ontological arguments. I wonder, like, if you had any ideas on how you would frame an ontological type argument within a transcendental framework.
Well, it's not like the ontological argument. What we're saying is the God of the Bible and his properties and attributes are an ontological necessity. Okay? They are the sine qua non. They are that which is indispensable for anything else. So the ontology that has a specific property set, that of the God of the Bible, is the only one where there can be actuality and intelligibility.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been not playing around, but I've been like, for some reason, I've been like really interested in I've been reading up a lot more on like Plantinga, and he has a even though he's not a presuppositionalist, he has a modal ontological argument, and I've been thinking about how you could put an actual.
I appreciate Plantinga, okay, and some of his stuff is kind of a quasi-transcendental approach. And I really do want to read more Plantinga stuff because he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he is, but you know, he doesn't come close to Van Til's correct representation of the biblical position. Okay, now listen to this.
I would agree.
And that's not a put down to Plantinga. The argument for the existence of God and for the truth of Christianity is objectively valid. We should not tone down the validity of the argument to the probability level. The argument may be poorly stated and never adequately stated, and may never be adequately stated, but in itself, the argument is absolutely sound. Christianity is the only reasonable position to hold. It is not merely as reasonable as other positions to hold. It is not merely as reasonable as other positions or a bit more reasonable than other position. It alone is the natural and reasonable position for man to take. By stating the argument as clearly as we can be used as agents of the Holy Spirit impressing the claims of God upon men. If we drop to the level of merely the probable truthfulness of Christian theism, we to that extent lower the claims of God upon men. Accordingly, I do not reject theistic proofs, but merely insist on formulating them in such a way as not to compromise the doctrines of Scripture. And by that, he means the transcendental claims of the Christian God, that the various scriptural passages emphasize God's transcendental necessity. So if we can present theistic proofs and evidences, but it's always got to be carefully explained that these only can be evidences if God is transcendentally necessary. Accordingly, I do not reject the theistic proofs, but merely insist in formulating them in such a way as to not compromise the doctrine of Scripture. That is to say, if a theistic proof is constructed as it ought to be constructed, it is objectively valid whenever the attitude of those to whom it come may be. Bonson talks about this in his lectures as well. He actually quotes that and then gives a commentary on that. That whatever evidences we're talking about, we have to, like, for example, suppose we make lines of reasoning for Noah's flood, right? What we say is that we could not even have evidences were it not for God. God's a transcendental necessity for the flood. You see, the moment we present the self-disclosure of God, and we present the natural and special revelation culminating in Jesus Christ and him coming again, that he's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega. Once a person has a basic understanding of that, and they say, no, you haven't proven it, what he's saying is contrary to what God has said. That God has said that his natural and special revelation are sufficient. Okay? And when an unbeliever says, no, they're not sufficient, then we have to choose to believe God rather than men. And once they deny what God has said, that the content of the Christian scriptures are self-attesting, self-authenticating collectively, and somebody rejects that and says, nope, you haven't proven it, then we need to go to drop the Trinity. And that's what they did in World War II. The name of the first atomic bomb to go off was called Trinity. So we dropped the bomb of the Trinity on them. Okay? And we say, the Trinity, God has revealed that he exists and that he is a transcendental necessity for all facts. If you do not accept that, then you're going to have to tell me, what is the transcendental necessity? What is it that is indispensable and ultimate that provides for the actuality and intelligibility of all facts? What is it? And what you're going to see day after day, we see the same thing. We see varying degrees of people flip-flopping, boulder dashing, verbally bamboozling, verbally misdirecting, playing word games, dodging, dancing, tap dancing, mental gymnastics. For what? For what reason? Because they do not want to relinquish their autonomous reasoning.
Yeah, I just don't know how they could do that. Like not how they could do that. Sorry, how like classical apologists can or evidentialists can try to biblically defend their methodology.
Well, unlike what Van Til says, is because they're borrowing from Greek philosophy.
Quite literally for some of them, yeah, quite.
well, yeah,
like
more so than others, yeah.
It's like I feel like there's a bunch of verses, like Acts 17 is probably the most blatant one, but like even like things like Proverbs 26, 4 and 5 it kind of lays out almost like a procedure, as Bonson talks about, like an actual procedure of how to answer the atheist. It's quite interesting.
All right.
Excuse me, I got a cold. I just took some Sudafed. I love Sudafed. It works so well for me.
The problem is most evidentialistic approaches are arbitrary in many cases.
Well,
Especially
outside
the
of
tr-
worldview,
well,
yeah.
especially the wait, I'm referring to evidentialistic argumentation in reference to apologetics.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Well,
saying.
They're
Well,
arbitrary, especially intelligent design, which attempts to posit this concept of irreducible complexity. Why isn't it not simplicity? Doesn't simplicity reflect God's nature? I mean,
I think you're confusing irreducible complexity with the idea that the genome is. Well,
no,
never.
I'm referring to a common appeal called the bacterial motor flagellum,
Okay, then you are referring to the thing
which
I was
has
thinking.
been picked apart many times.
You're talking about the bacterial
Flagellum, the supposed irreducible.
the only problem with the ID approach, okay, is that it's not being presented from a transcendental point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have teleology in our world. It is designed, right? When you point out the obvious to the unbeliever, they're already operating from a framework that's simply going to reinterpret things anyway. Okay? So what we have to say is to you is, listen, the God who is and the God who eternally created things and revealed himself in natural and special revelation and revealed the design that is inherent within the animal kingdom and the parameters of physics and the universe that you deny. When you deny that teleology is there as a product of God's revelation of himself as the transcendental necessity, you have now exposed yourself to a world of chance. And in a world of chance, you cannot have any intelligibility. You can't have science. I was just reading in Van Til's book, The Defense of the Faith, how he says, without the Christian worldview, you cannot have intelligible science. Now, does that mean that atheist scientists, studying at a Hadron Collider can't figure out stuff? Yeah, they can. But they're figuring out certain things in physics that are inconsistent and in spite of their model of worldview. Because if they were consistent, they would give up. So, like Van Til, if you're going to present evidences, there's an appropriate way of doing it and an inappropriate way. If you're just simply presenting evidences as A, B, C, and D, and it raises the probability of God, that is not biblical. But if you appeal to evidences as God has revealed them and saying that they are indicative of God being a transcendental necessity, then when they deny the evidences as revelation of God, the design as evidence of revelation of God, then they're denying God's transcendental necessity. And then they plunge themselves into an abyss of unintelligibility.
What do you think of Stephen Meyer?
Well, I actually listen to him on a semi-regular basis, and I learn a lot from him. The only thing is that they're trying to wage a battle, long term, and that what they don't realize is that the position that we're in was simply because in the 19th century, Darwin specifically decided to throw God overboard as the transcendental necessity, and that's why science became atheistic or without Godism. So I feel I feel that it's some of the some of their reasonings are very profound and brilliant, but there's a fatal flaw in it because they're just reasoning probabilistically. Like I said, evidences have to be presented from a transcendental framework. Otherwise, you're just saying God is more probable. Okay? Look, like for example, when I quote Romans 1, I'll say, all temporal facts are indicative of the eternal. And notice I stopped there. I just said the eternal. Now, the unbeliever can accept what I say, or they can reject it. They'll say, they can sit there and go, oh, well, it's something eternal, but why does it have to be God? And I'll say, because then if it's an eternal, non-rational, impersonal thing, then how are you rational? You have an antithesis. You have a irrational, rational dialectic there. You have the ground of all being is irrational, non-rational, and yet you say you're rational. Well, how is that? So there is teleology and design in Scripture, but it's presented transcendentally as that this is a part of God's revelation. It is not that we appeal to design as being more probable. What we say is God has revealed the characteristics of the world have the unmistakable imprint of design and teleology. And this is a part of God's natural revelation. And if you deny that, you plunge yourself into unintelligibility. You're not just saying, oh, look, the odds, and by the way, I've argued probabilistically myself, and I do so just to show them that they're inconsistent with their own probabilistic reasoning. But reasoning probabilistically alone without a transcendental reasoning is doomed to failure. We have to show them that the very non-acceptance of the self-disclosure of the God of the Bible and natural and special revelation is instantly and comprehensively futile. It's a form of you guys know what immolation is?
No.
Immolation is when people have protested things by sacrificing themselves, by dousing themselves with something flammable, and they burn themselves up. So the denial of God's self-communication in history through natural and special revelation, they philosophically immolate themselves.
Well, and they'll be immolated when they die as well.
Yeah. In order not to relinquish their autonomy, they immolate themselves. They would rather commit philosophical harikari, philosophical immolation, rather than say, yeah, you know what? God is transcendentally necessary for everything, and you know what? I got to repent. You know, Van Til blew me away. I was reading yesterday or the day before, and I don't think I'll be able to find it at the moment. But in the defense of the faith, he said, without God, ontologically, the God of the Bible, meaning God and his plan of creation, you wouldn't even be able to count. And I first read that, I went, wow. And then he explained why. It's because the very practice of counting means that you're going to have a system for truth.
You have to have some sort of basis of chronology.
Yeah, you're going to have a system of truth, of chronology and counting and reason. And, you know, when you first read it, you're like, wow, that's a strong claim. And then you realize, wow, it's true. See, the unbelievers want the parameters of the world that God created so they can walk around, talk, and reason, but they don't want the God who is the transcendental necessity. They want the parameters that God made for them to live and move and breathe and think, and they want that to be the transcendental necessity and not God himself.
They're like a bum on a corner, bumming some coins off God.
Kind of like a cosmic Bernie Sanders.
What?
I personally resent that. I'm in the Iowa caucus, and I want everyone to go out and vote for me.
They want to redistribute God's creation.
Hey,
Oh,
Jonathan.
Darth, please don't remind people that that crazy man is in my state.
Jonathan.
Yeah, what's up?
Neo just finished his article on Basil.
I'll have to check it out. I'm very
It's
excited.
pretty. It's pretty weak.
I'm so excited to read this.
AppSalter just posted it in another server.
That debate you had earlier was really good, Darth. I forget the guy's name, but
Well, I'm still working on it. I'm still learning. You know, I was plowing through the Defense of the Faith. It's a hard book, and there's a lot of it. There's a number of pages I just read through very quickly because I'm not an expert on the history of philosophy, but there's just so many nuggets of gold. But I would not, if those of you are interested in reading, don't start with that book. Okay, if you're going to start with Pushing the Antithesis, then go to Always Ready, and then Presuppositional Apologetics Stated and Defended. You start there.
What about On Christian Epistemology by Van Til?
Is that the same thing as a survey of a Christian epistemology?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, I would say. I mean, that's not an easy read either, but it's a lot easier to read that than the Defense of the Faith.
Yeah, I think I might have Defense of the Faith.
I'm kind of guilty. I never finished Survey of a Christian Epistemology because I didn't feel like reading through when I first got it. I didn't feel like reading through the critiques of I think it was Platonic or the Greek.
Well, don't feel bad. On some of those passages, I will read through more quickly because he's writing to a wide audience of Christians, some who have greater expertise in these fields than we do, and so you can more quickly go through that. But there's a lot of meat through it that are just absolute biblical gold in a survey of the Christian epistemology.
And now that I've grown, I'm gonna get back into it because I've grown to like the more in-depth analytic philosophy stuff. So I'm gonna definitely go back and read it, but gotta find the time.
Is the In Defense of the Faith writing the one that's kind of short?
No, this is actually it's a long book. It's
how many pages?
Tell you in a second. It's over 400 pages.
Huh. I don't remember it being that long.
But
longer than the Quran.
I would just say that there are a good part of the book where you're going to be skimming through a couple of pages at a time because it's either hard to understand or he's going into the nitty-gritty of theological history, authors you've never heard. But every couple of pages they're just gold quotations that are just absolute biblical gold, and you're like, and the reason why they're gold is he's just simply exemplifying biblical truths and how they apply philosophically.
Have you read I haven't read it, but I know because it's pretty interesting, the philosophical relationship between Kant and Van Til, because I know Van Til took stuff from Kant, but he also completely destroyed. Have you read his I think it's his PhD dissertation on German idealism? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know of it. I haven't read it.
I might give it a read.
Yeah. His expertise was on idealism.
Makes a lot of sense. A lot of his terminology.
I would strongly encourage you to start with reading Pushing the Antithesis several times, then reading Always Ready, and then Presuppositional Apologetics. Once you've gone through those a couple of times and you're ready to digest more, then get a copy of Van Til's Apologetic by Bonson before you start reading Van Til. Okay, and listen to the Bonson lectures, because Bonson is probably Van Til's among his best students and translators, if you will. Frame is also a good one as well.
Bonson's very good at making these complex concepts very easy to
Yes.
digest and very powerful.
I don't know. I couldn't really read through Bonson without getting bored.
Which book?
I think it was one of his beginner level entry books.
Do you know what it was?
It was probably what's the one I gave you, DL?
It could have been Pushing the Antithesis. It was kind of too
Well,
simple.
that's
and
an introductory book.
It was like, it was kind of non sequitorial.
What?
Well, it's a good book as a starter.
Wait, where's the non sequitur? What?
It seems to put more emphasis on cutting the line of neutrality. Is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, the book is called Pushing the Antithesis.
I know.
So, yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Have you NRG? Have you read Cornelius Van Til, An Analysis of His Thought by Frame?
No, but I think I may have. No, I have another writing by Frame.
Yeah, that's a really, really good book. An overview of Van Til. It's different. It's better in some respects than Van Til's Apologetic, but Van Til's Apologetic is better than that book in terms of breaking down the apologetic methodology. But they both complement each other. But if you really want to understand Van Til, then reading Frame's book and Bonson's book, Van Til's Apologetic, are an absolute must.
And DL, the thing that sucks about it's not anything that sucks, but about Van Til, or not Van Til's Apologetic, about an analysis of his thought by Frame. It's not really online, so you have to I've never found it online, so you have to buy it. You could get it's pretty relatively cheap on Amazon. I got mine used.
Which book?
Cornelius Van Til, An Analysis of His Thought.
Yeah, it's not online. It's worth buying it. It's
worth every penny.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal book.
I'm not really into commentaries.
It's not a commentary. It's a no. It's just an analysis of his thought.
Of the few people still alive, both Frame and Bonson were probably some of the best people positioned who actually studied under him and to help understand Van Til. I profited immensely by starting with Bonson's material and Frame's material first before reading Van Til, because otherwise I would have been discouraged reading the Defense of the Faith, because there's just some of it I'm just I don't understand this. He's writing to people who are have masters or doctoral levels in theology and background and all. And he's dropping a lot of names and stuff like that. But having read and heard Bonson and Frame say, Van Til, even though he was a brilliant theologian and a great teacher of biblical apologetics, the organization of his presentation always wasn't as his best, and he's kind of hard to understand. But once you look, trust me, an analysis of his thought, it's not really like a commentary. He's explaining how Van Til thought, and I'm telling you, you won't be sorry getting it. It's worth it. It's a phenomenal book.
Does anyone have a PDF of In Defense of the Faith? I'd like to read.
I think there is one online, but it's not the current edition, the fourth edition. The fourth edition, there's a lot of notes by Scott Oliphant.
Okay, I could get the first, second, or third edition.
Yeah, it's available online. It's floating around.
All right.
Scott Oliphant's
I could have sworn that I had the PDF of it, but it was only around 40 pages, so I was disappointed.
All right, let me look.
All right.
Yeah, DL. I mean, it's you got to start with what you can. So if you think you're ready to read more, it's all about where you're at. I
started with the first presuppositionalist writing that I read was on Christian survey on a Christian epistemology. And it made sense.
Yeah, like everyone, I guess everyone has like their own way of getting into it. Like I've been a lot more into the like a lot of the atheist philosophers recently.
Do you have my link to my Google Drive?
Who, me or NRG?
NRG. Do you have my link to my Google Drive?
I might. I don't remember. You could resend it.
All right, I'll send it to you again. It's there's a folder in there with a lot of Van Til books. I don't know if a Defense of the Faith is in there. I'll have to look, but I know the Defense of the Faith is floating around out there somewhere.
For some reason, b-ok.org doesn't really have most of Van Til's writings, and that website seems to have everything. So
Yeah, it's older stuff. That's why a lot of it. I noticed what you're talking about. Like even some obviously like Van Til analysis of thought isn't on there. So.
Well, it seems like we're fighting a two-front war. The first one, obviously, against the non-believers, and the second one, even against other fellow believers who are so ensconced and used to this sort of classical apologetic based on evidentialism. Like we gotta clean up their messy apologetic in order to really start changing the tide of biblical apologetics.
You can get a copy of the Defense of the Faith 4th edition for $15.
It's a sounds like a good deal.
It is a good deal.
Yeah, I just want to puke when other Christians say, well, you can't use presuppositional apologetics because it commits circular reasoning. It's just so annoying.
That's
If I had a
literally
nickel,
That's like William Lane Craig's, and I love the guy, but that's like his one of his main critiques of presuppositionalism is it commits I think he said it's a logical howler. But then
No. That's a misrepresentation of even his critique.
He goes on to comment it too. He actually says that at the center of presuppositionalism lies a powerful epistemological transcendental argument, or something like that.
He says, as commonly understood, it commits a logical howler.
As it's commonly understood.
And then he goes on to dispute that common understanding.
So why does he
What is
use
a
it?
logical-
Because he's used to evidentialism?
No, and by the way, Craig does praise a transcendental reasoning, but then he throws Van Til under the bus in the 5 views on apologetics. And listen, I'm not going to throw Craig under the bus. There's stuff that I love about him, and there are things that I don't like. Okay, obviously, I'm nothing compared to him. He, has 2 PhDs, written a lot of books, but he made a major blunder. He said Van Til was not a philosopher, and that is a major faux pas. If you're critiquing biblical presuppositionalism, where Van Til is the forefather of this, who said this is the biblical method, and you say he wasn't a philosopher when he got a PhD in philosophy from Princeton University and he wrote a doctoral dissertation on idealism, I mean that's a major mistake.
I'm sure
How could
Craig
they
has
possibly mistook
he's
that?
got
If
so
you
many
did basic
emails from
research, you
people
would have
who's
found that
correcting his
out.
position.
What?
So how could he have possibly mistook that? If he would have done basic research, he would have found that out.
Well, because he probably hasn't really read a lot of Van Til, and probably just thought because Van Til taught apologetics at Westminster that he was a theologian and that he didn't have a PhD in philosophy.
I mean, but I get that, but that's no excuse for not researching into the man first before you make a claim.
Yeah. I'm sure that Craig has changed his position now. I'm sure he realizes his mistake.
Well, he may realize his mistake about throwing Van Til under the bus, but he nonetheless did an audio thing where he critiqued Psi 10 Brukengate and he ridiculed it. Look, the problem is Craig, as much as I think he's brilliant, and I will in years to come still learn from many of his writings, especially this like stuff on time that he wrote. He likes to capitulate to unbelievers. He said right in front of Lawrence Krauss, he was asked, "Do you know for certain that God exists?" And he said, "No." Now, how can any Christian say that?
An evidentialist Christian might say that.
If we don't have certainty, whatever we want that to mean, of God's existence, then we have certainty of nothing.
Our faith is in vain.
Yeah.
And even worse than that, what Jesus did on the cross would be in vain.
It all goes down to this. I think it's really built into the evidentialist or classical apologetics tradition, this idea that we start with our finite reasoning and we try to reason to like a general God, and then maybe we have some supplementary arguments that are probabilistic. Yeah, then we have supplementary arguments that are like probabilistic that might get us, more towards, the God of the Bible. But then they say, oh, we're just going to take a leap of faith. Like it's basically, they say that faith covers where the gap between reason and reality, essentially, which is just dumb, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just putting God to a level of a creature. Well, God probably exists, and it's probably the God of Christianity. And then you just use an overwhelming case to sort of, like John said, take that leap to connect to Christianity.
And it's deeply rooted too. I mean, it goes all the way back to Aquinas. I mean, and it's like usually they're all like really smart people. Like Aquinas was a brilliant philosopher, in my opinion. Like William Lane Craig is a smart guy, like a really smart guy too. It's like they're all like really smart, and it's like I don't know why I don't know. It's just so confusing to me how they can read Acts 17 and not see precept. I don't know. It's just annoying to me how such smart people are using such a defective. I mean, look what R.C. Sproul. Look what R.C. Sproul wrote about it, or wrote and said about it. I mean, he completely ridiculed, in a sense, presuppositional apologetics. And from what I've heard from Bonson, specifically in one of his lectures, they completely butcher what presuppositional apologetics is in one of his books.
In Van Til, an analysis of his thought, Frame just mops the floor with Sproul for completely botching. I mean, and Frame goes into detail. I don't know if you remember that. He goes into specific detail how they, in a grotesquely sloppy manner, misrepresent Van Til. And it's not some rare mistake.
Like, what is Sproul's like beef with transcendental apologetics?
Because Sproul is a classical and an evidentialist as well. That's what it's about. And in the book, Van Til, An Analysis of a Thought, they show that Sproul and his co-writer, whose name escapes me at the moment, basically accuse Van Til of advocating for fideism, but Frame goes in and shows step by step that they're the ones who are actually guilty of fideism and not Van Til.
I can't imagine how anybody cannot see the plain, like inevitable, irrefutable foundation that evidence cannot stand alone as a brute fact, especially if you're a Christian. There's just no way conceivably for them to miss that.
I couldn't find Van Tel's In Defense of the Faith.
I can't find it either. I know I've seen a copy once, but I didn't save it. So.
There's one on scribed.org, but you have to assign for a free trial.
You got to be careful though, because that may be defending the faith. That's not the same book.
It says In Defense of the Faith.
Okay.
I can understand if like someone is used to evidential reasoning and just seeing evidence as proof facts and things like that, but when you're actually confronted with it, and then you're presented the true biblical worldview, I don't understand how you can continue to stand by that old way of thinking. The same thing happened to me. Like when I first came across transcendental reasoning, I was just convicted with just the obvious truth of it, and there was no way I could possibly go back.
My first encounter with transcendental reasoning was listening to Greg Bonson debate against Gordon Stein. I had never heard this before. I was completely blown out of the water. Okay. It was just an eye-opening experience, and just overwhelmed that not only is this biblical, it's solidly biblical.
Yeah, that happened to me too. Like when you came into one of my hangouts years ago, and then you start dropping all this transcendental stuff, and I'm like, my gosh, that is right. How did I not see this before?
Yeah, I'm looking through the book.
You see, here's the thing about Craig and other people, both the classical and the evidentialists. They're willing to acquiesce to certain implicit transcendentals of the unbeliever. They're catering to the non-neutrality of the implicit transcendental parameters of existence, but they're unwilling to stand on the transcendental necessity of God and his self-disclosure of himself. Okay? The unbeliever's not neutral. The unbeliever is committed from the moment they open up their mouth to the non-necessity of God as the transcendental. Well, we cannot be neutral ourselves. We either have to be committed to the transcendental necessity of God and his self-disclosure of himself, or the only other option is that we're going to capitulate to the implicit foundational parameters of the unbeliever that are there without reference to God.
Yeah, I immediately wrapped my head around it when you told me about it, and it was just transformative, man.
It is.
And the dirty little secret is the unbelievers wrap their head around it too, but they don't want to. Like once they're convicted with it, then they start acting like a cop like a criminal running from a cop.
Yep.
I mean, there are no proof facts. Proof facts are mute facts, and it's almost as if not entirely, the case that where you treat facts as like mini gods themselves.
Looks like nothing. Okay. It's fine.
And from the evidentialist perspective, I thought the moral argument was one of the most powerful arguments for the existence of God.
To be honest, I would.
Alongside things like the ontological argument, things like this, but transcendental reasoning, man, it talks about necessity. It doesn't talk about the strength of the evidence. It talks about the necessity of God Himself. Man,
I actually. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I actually think, and this might be a different opinion than what some of you guys have. I actually think that the moral argument is actually transcendental. I actually, even though they don't propose it within a revelational epistemology, I think out of all the,
you have no idea how much I agree with what you just said.
because the question they're basically asking is, since there are objective moral values, what are the necessary? I mean, they're not saying this, but I'm sort of formulating it. They're asking what needs to be true in order for objective moral values to be true, which sort of hinges on, I mean, it is just transcendental reasoning, but obviously they don't propose it that way. But out of all the evidential arguments, I think that one comes the closest to being a transcendental argument, the moral argument.
You know, now that I look back in retrospect, man, like, I think I indirectly apprehended the transcendental nature of the moral argument without even realizing it. Because I always used to ask the question, well, what basis do you even have to say anything? What basis do you have for any moral facts that you assert or anything like that? And your worldview that, things are just matter of motion, chemicals, and things like this, and then you just simply invent up these moral norms. Like, you don't have a basis for morality whatsoever. And then I didn't package that in the transcendental framework, but looking back on it, I could see it makes perfect sense in that context.
Yeah, the thing is, at every level, non-Christian thought fails, just in a different way. I mean, even it's catastrophic because it's not like a one. Even if you have the right idea, but you don't have the right worldview, you're gonna fall into incoherence. Like people like, I don't know who am I thinking of? Like people like Kant, for example. Like he reasoned transcendentally, but he reasoned autonomously, and he still ended up in absurdity. He had the transcendental method, but he reasoned autonomously, and his whole system collapsed. So, it's not just the method; you also have to have the correct worldview, or else you can't properly apply the method.
That's right. I agree.
I'm still looking for an old edition of the Defense of the Faith, and I can't find it. But if you do decide to buy it, I mean, there are chunks of it that are hard to get through, but there's so many chunks of gold in it, it's worthy of getting. If you go on to Presuppositionalism 101, and you can, there are some various ebooks